All right, so we are on live. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this Breakthrough Church Global Conversation. This used to be Breakthrough Nation live chat, but we have changed our name since COVID. COVID has that ability to make you rethink and reevaluate a lot of things. I'm sure that happens to you too. And so please, for those of you who are jumping on and will be jumping on later, do share this conversation, this episode with your friends and your networks, because tonight it is going to be amazing. Also, just want to say thank you to those of you who have been sharing conversations on this platform from the last couple of months and weeks. There has been amazing speakers here with profound understanding, depth of wisdom and experience from the various arena of life, from church, marketplace, business, politics, sports, different arena of life. And they have brought to us their beautiful stories that has been a blessing, not only to me, but I know that it has been a blessing to you and your friends and family. So this one will be the same. And so I have tonight with me a very good friend. We've known each other for a very long time. And this is his first time on our live chat on this platform. And I'm so excited to welcome to our conversation tonight my good friend, Wes League. Wes, welcome.
Thanks, David. It's so good to be on here tonight and have this conversation with you. Yes.
Yeah, Wes, we have known each other, as I mentioned earlier, for some times now. And I just want to go back to the very beginning, because this is your first time on our platform. If you could just give us a little backdrop, a little snapshot of what you are doing currently, maybe a little bit about your family, where you live, and maybe your favorite food and your favorite color.
Well, favorite food would have to be pavlova,
Oh,
and, which is not very good when I'm supposed to not be having sugar. Its favorite color is blue. I'm married to Pam, so we've been married 28 years now. So we have 4 kids. So Johanna is 23 and is engaged to be married now.
wow.
Then Bethany is 21. Sam is 20. So Bethany's studying paramedics and nursing. Sam is doing his chippies apprenticeship. And then we have a 12-year-old. We have a surprise child, which threw some spanner in the works all those years ago. And I'll talk a bit about that perhaps later on.
Yeah.
For work-wise, one of my main income sources is I lecture in entrepreneurship. So I do that at Torrens Uni in their Bachelor of Entrepreneurship program. I'm lecturing at CHC next semester as well in marketing. We're also relaunching a program called Co-Starters, which is about helping people start businesses. I sit on 4 different boards. So the Christian Business Network, which is bringing together Christians in business, education, government, and the church. I sit on a distance education board for a distance education school, Redwood College. Yeah. I'm also the vice chair of Australia Prays, which runs the National Day of Prayer and Fasting every year. And I also sit on a business's private foundation board as well. So all that keeps me fairly busy.
Very busy. Very busy.
Yes.
Wow. And it seems to me like you have one foot in what we call the church and one foot in what is commonly known now, common terminology that we've been using on this platform, the marketplace. Can you just talk to us, Wes, about the difference between your prophetic gift? Because forgive me for saying this, but I do believe that you are a prophet. And I think I needed to make mention of that because it does carry a certain seriousness and sacredness and privileges when it comes to addressing people like you and many others, because God has actually placed that mandate and that burden on you to be a blessing to the church and, of course, people outside of the church. But as a prophet, can you just talk to us about the difference between operating in that gift in the church and the marketplace?
You know, David, I mentioned before that we had a surprise child, and I'll never forget the night I came home from a meeting and sat down and said to my wife, I asked her this fateful question, "Are you pregnant?" and thinking that the answer would be no, but she said yes. And that kind of really rocked our world, because the kids were all just at school, like life was returning to normal, it was great. And so I'm telling you this story for a reason, because I was doing a lot of work in the church and different things, but my income was all over the place. And as part of that unsettling, my wife said to me, you need to go get a full-time job in this season for us.
Like a real job.
Yes. So, I followed my wife's advice and actually got a job teaching at Martin College in town. Yeah. And to be quite honest, David, I wasn't very happy about it, and was moaning to God about it one day. And he said to me, where's you're here because you need to learn how to prophesy to non-Christians.
Oh, wow.
And so a very interesting situation happened. One of my students was telling me a situation of how she fell pregnant. And I got a blow by blow. I mean, I got a blow by blow description. There was nothing left to the imagination after that one. Oh, and wow. I went home that night and said, God, what the heck was that all about? And because I said that was way too much information for my head. Oh, and wow. He said to me, I want you to go back and tell her that your son is the son of destiny, that you did everything you could not to fall pregnant. And I knew that from what she had told me, but she did fall pregnant. And she, it was like God saying, I wanted that child to be born. And so I thought, so the next day I went back to class and told her this, and she said, he's the only one of my 4 kids that goes to church and stuff like that. And so it was very interesting. I think one of the things is that in the church, when we prophesy, there's kind of a bit of a formula for doing it. But in the marketplace, you can't do that. It's more, I think it's more a general conversation. It's more, I think this is what we need to do. Sometimes it's not actually saying God says, but it's having a conversation with them about where things are going. I'll tell you another example. One of my other students, I had done a session in class on being worthy, because it wasn't part of the curriculum, but it fitted in with what we're doing. And afterwards, one of my gay students reached out to me and said, Wes, can we have a one-on-one conversation as a result of some of the things I said? And I thought, okay, God, this is fine. This is great. I got on very well with the student. But before the meeting, I just sat down and said, God, what do you want me to say to him? And he said, I want you to tell him to ring his mum and say, thank you for raising me. And I thought, how do you bring that into a conversation, God? And it was very interesting. This was a student who came from an extremely wealthy family, like private jet wealthy family. His family owned the land on which Israel now is. So when Israel became a nation, they got a very significant payout, and their dad had taken that and invested it very well.
Oh, wow.
But because he was gay, he'd been ostracized by his family. And so no longer lived in the Middle East where they're from, but had been in Sweden, and the business had gone bankrupt, and then he'd come to Australia. Anyhow, so he was just talking to me about worthiness and some of the things I said to him. And then I brought in, mate, I just sense that you've got to really phone your mum and say, thank you so much for raising me. Anyhow, about a week later, he phones me back and says that he did that, and his relationship with his mum was restored. And just through a simple phone call. So there's there's some 2 practical examples. I know in the prophetic we have certain rules, but there's sometimes I think, I think I need to throw that rule out and let's just say what God's saying. And one of the things that to me is when you're using the prophetic in the marketplace, it affects your bottom line straight away. Yeah. If God is telling you to do something and change something, or spend something or give something or do something, there is a direct impact on your bottom line, perhaps more so than what the prophetic is in the church. And it's there's no better way though to clarify with God what he's saying.
Can I interject there? Because you said that the prophetic in the marketplace affect your bottom line immediately. Are you saying that when God speaks to you about doing something or making certain decisions, that you have to act on it straight away? Is that what you're saying? Because as you said, it affected the bottom line immediately. Because I understand in business, there's a whole lot of things you need to consider before obeying the Lord. Because if you do that one thing, it has a ripple effect, the domino effect that affects everything else. We're talking about your customers. We're talking about what you're ordering in, your clients. It's not as easy or straightforward as that in the church, because you can prophesy to anybody in the church, the Lord said, and there's probably not much that they have to consider. They still have the time to pray about it and maybe just go to God and say, look, clarify to me the practical implication of this. But they have, let's just say, a space and time to be able to think through and work things through with God. This is within the church context. Are you saying that in the marketplace? Because I'm a marketplace person. I run businesses also, and I want some clarity on what you just said, because being a business owner, it's different, because you got to consider your bottom line before you make a certain decision. But if God is saying, right, and He's saying, take a certain amount of money and put it there, do you just go with that, or do you put on your business head and evaluate everything before you make that decision? Sorry, I needed just to bring that up to you.
I
want some clarification, because there will be people from the marketplace listening to you, because they probably want some clarity on that.
David, I think it's about where you're at in your walk with God too. So like in the early days, God would start speaking to me about something, and He'd be testing you on something small, like give $100 here or $100 there, or hire this person, don't hire that person, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I find that, I've been doing this for a long time now. The more I go along, the more I think you get sensitive to know, is that God or is that not God? And I'm going to make a statement. The only real way you're going to know if it is God is by doing it. Because you can sit and pontificate and do whatever, but unless you do it, you're only going to know it's God. Like I was talking to someone last week in church, and they're obviously in a difficult financial situation, and I felt God say to me, you actually need to give him some money. And so I got back to the car, and I thought, with Pay ID these days, a lot of people have their mobile phone is attached to their bank account. So I actually tried to see if his was, and it wasn't. Anyhow, so it was kind of like God saying to me, you need to reach out to him and say you need to give him some money. So I got to give me an amount in mind to give, and so I said that to him. But actually, when it came to making the payment, God said to me, no, I want you to double that. And I thought, heck, but it's funny, like with me, God often refers back to something. So many years ago, we started a ministry called Crown Financial Ministries in Australia, and I had a list of people to contact from the US, because it was a US-based organization, about potential funders for Australia. And I flew down to Adelaide, and I met with this guy, and I'd asked him for a certain amount of money, and he had agreed to give that, and it was a significant sum. And then when the check arrived, like we're talking checks, remember those days? When I pulled it out of the envelope, there was a note on top that said, "Sorry, Wes, the amount is not what we agreed." And my heart just sunk. I thought, oh no, God. But then I turned over, the amount was double what he had promised me. And God had brought that back to me and said, "Wes, I want you to double it." And it actually did something in the person's life. So, there's I think God will take you on a step-by-step journey, and it is a matter of faith. And He keeps bringing me back to Abraham. Abraham wasn't the most obedient man that ever lived in the Bible. Right from the start, God said to him to take to leave your country and leave your people and go to the land I'm going to show you. So what does he do? He leaves his country, but takes his people. Right from the start. Okay. He disobeys God. And of course, we know later on there was all sorts of stuff with that. But then it got to the point of when it came time to sacrificing Isaac, which is many, many years down the track. God said to him, go sacrifice him. And it was immediate obedience. He went up and got to that place. And I think God is taking us to a place of immediate obedience. Now, there are some times that like there is a process. Like one of the I was at a prophetic conference last year, and you know, they were wanting to pray for everyone this particular night, so I went out to be prayed for. They prayed for the people up to my left, up to my right, wherever, and then skipped over me and prayed for me on the other side. And like, did I not wear my deodorant tonight? You know, like, what's wrong with me that no one, this has happened to me a number of times, isn't it? I get used to it. Anyhow, so while I was there, I said, okay, God, what do you want to speak to me about? Obviously, you want to speak to me about something specifically to me and not through somebody else. And he said to me, some of you know me, I know I'm a big fan of a guy called Bob Beaudine, a book called Two Chairs. And he said to me, it's time for you to bring Bob out to Australia. And it was just so clear. God, this is so clear. So I went home and messaged Bob. Bob, God's finally said it's time for you to come out to Australia. And he responds, but where's they'll arrest me? And I thought, what the heck have you done, Bob, that they're going to arrest you?
Yeah.
And this was at the height of, you know, all over the vaccine mandate and stuff. And Novak Djokovic was in jail, being deported, you know, and so he was referring to that. He said, where's I, you know, I'm not vaxxed. And so if I came to Australia, they'd deport me.
Yeah.
And so I thought, God, I'm sure that was so clear. Anyhow, the next day I went out for my morning walk and we're just saying, God, I'm sure that's what you said to me. He said, Wes, you interpreted it that one way, but there's more than one way to bring Bob to Australia. And he dropped it in my mind, I want you to give 1,000 of his books away this year.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, that's more realistic. I can do that. And like, you know, his books are $25 or whatever they are. So I thought, well, that's 25,000. God, we don't have that to do that. But if you're saying for me to do that, then I do that. Anyhow, I went back to Bob and said, Bob, I had a clarifying time with God. He says just to give away 1,000 of your books this year. Bob's response to me was, Wes, I'll send you those 1,000 books as long as you pay for the postage.
Oh,
so, wow. There you go.
So that's what you mean by the bottom line. When you obey God in the marketplace, immediately it will affect your bottom line, because when you rang him up, and I don't know whether you were thinking of how much it will cost you to bring him over.
Well, I had in my mind how much it would cost. Yes.
All right. So, but now you probably have a certain amount of, or a picture of how much it will cost you based on the original idea in your mind. But then the idea of selling his books, and now he's saying to you, he will give you the books for free. Just pay for the stamp, and look at that. But that's why I'm intrigued and interested to hear the way you process the word, the speaking of God in a marketplace, because it does affect our bottom line. But maybe, like you said, maybe we need to go back and ensure that we're hearing him clearly.
Yes. So the thing I'd say with that, David, is it's okay to question God.
Okay
to question God. And I think this has come because, look, I grew up in the AOG church. You know, for some reason I got in my mind that it's not okay to question God. But
wow.
I think what that is that it's not okay to question church leadership.
Oh, wow. Oh, oops. Maybe we should say la there for a moment, and let that bomb drop. Seriously, keep going. That's good.
Because you look at, like, one of my favorite passages in the Bible is when the angel appears to Mary, you know, and Mary, you know, in all her fear and trembling, but she says to the angel, after the angel says to her, you know, you're going to have a baby, blah, 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 blah. She says, but how can this be? And like, it wasn't a disrespectful question. It was, hang on, you're telling me this, God, but how is this to happen? So because she asked that question, the angel downloaded to her all this information and told her all the practicalities about how it's going to happen. So this is the thing that I've learned. Okay, when God starts to speak to you about something, don't just take it and run with it, because there's a couple of things with that. Often we interpret it our way. So with the Bob Beaudine situation, I interpreted it, I needed to physically bring the man to Australia. But actually, that's not what God was saying to me. He was giving me something else. And then, but then as it unpacked, so last year we gave away 1,000 of those books because that postage cost was covered by somebody else. And I had a mandate on me that I couldn't sell the books, but I had to give them away. And so God brought me across 1,000 people's paths, and we gave, and the impact of that has been quite substantial because it's all about teaching people how to hear the voice of God. So it's there. So this is one of the things is we have to be curious. We have to go back and ask God those things. And look, another prime example is Samuel, when God says to Samuel to go anoint David. So what is it? 1 Samuel 16, 1-13.
Yeah.
You know, God says to Samuel, you've got to anoint David. Samuel says to God, you're asking me to commit a treasonous act.
Yeah.
Do you think about it? This is the man who's responsible for anointing the kings in the country. And he has to go anoint somebody else as king, which is an act of treason.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
you can get your head cut off for doing that.
I know. That's right. This is not. So, Samuel says to God this, but God gives him a solution. He says, that's okay. Just say that you're going out to offer a sacrifice and worship God. And so he does that. And then, of course, he gets to Jesse and all these kids are being brought to him. And God keeps saying, no. Is this the one, God? No. Is this the one, God? No. Is this the one, God? And he gets to the end of the kids. Yeah. And he's saying, hang on, but God, you told me. And he said, there must be another kid. Do you have another kid around? So it's I love that passage because I feel like that's how God leads me. It's a conversation back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And, often pastors say, people come to them and say, but God told me to do this. So my answer is, yes, I don't doubt that God told you that. But what is he saying to you now? What's he saying to you now? What was the ongoing conversation? Because when God speaks to you, it's an invitation to go deeper with him. It's an invitation to a conversation. And what does this look like? And so often when I've had a prophetic word or when God's spoken to me, I've interpreted it one way. And I'll give you a huge example of this. This is a view.
So what you're saying there, Wes, if I could just jump in there. So it's a case of it's not what God said, but what God is saying.
Yeah.
Because God can speak to you at that original place of encounter. Yes. But then he wants to continue to speak to you and take you through the process that you need to be responsible for so that the original word unfold itself accurately and perfectly. Am I right in saying that based on what you're saying in your experience, Wes?
Yeah. And I think if you look at the greats in the Bible, that's what was going on as well. It's because it's God is after a relationship with us.
Yeah.
Like you didn't just talk to Tina on your wedding day and that was it. I'm married to God. I'm married to Tina now. That's all I need to do. It's done and dusted. It's an ongoing conversation. It's a constant conversation.
Wow.
And I think this is God is. It's an invitation to a constant conversation with him.
Wow. Wes, I know that there's something else that you wanted to touch on as an example, but which we can always go back to that. But I want to ask you another question. If we could go back to the church setting or context and then make our way into the marketplace in the area of God speaking. Wes, I have seen so many people passed away, and I've heard many things that have come from their mouths about what the Lord said. And there's a lot of unfulfilled prophecies and the speaking of God, which has actually caused a lot of pain and anger and frustration in the church and the marketplace. I have been exposed to many of these speaking, and there are things that God has spoken to me that has come to pass, but there's a whole host of stuff that I've recorded, Wes, that I'm thinking, oh God, I'm a certain age now in my life, and you promised me this way back, and I'm wondering, is it going to happen or not? Because I don't want to be like one of those who died one day and realized that in my prophetic books 50% of what God said has not come to pass. Is there anything, Wes, that you can talk to us about how to minimize that? And maybe that my question is why? Why are so many people saying so many things and so much unfulfilled prophecies are still left on the table? Some are sick, bedridden in the hospital. I don't know whether they're going to bounce back and finish what God has spoken. And some are gone already. And there are many of us at this point, and many young generation are watching this charade. And I don't want to call it that, but there's a lot of frustration and disappointment, Wes, in this area. So I just wanted to ask you, what's happening there?
Dave, we had a very good friend. We've had a lot of friends pass away lately. It's been very, very sad. Someone said to me recently, I don't want to be your friend anymore. But one of those people was somebody who had received a word back in the 70s and was waiting for it to come to pass. And obviously it hasn't, and he's gone home to be with God. But so one, this is not an unusual thing. You just got to read Hebrews 11. Like, you know, it says there that they died without the fulfillment of those things. So there is a part of that happening. I've actually got to the point where I think we need to lay those things down. If it hasn't come to pass, we've got to lay it down and go back and have you had a conversation with God about it? I mean, that's a tough thing to say. And, you know, if there's stuff that we've written and said, you know, I know there's stuff that I've written and said when in my early years of ministry, and I think, oh God, can we just wipe that out, please? But that's also part of the maturing process that we go through. And it's one of those things to say, hey, I got this wrong, or it hasn't happened. Let's admit it and move forward. I know there's some things that I've said in the prophetic at times. I think, oh, heck whiz. And I know that's part of the reason why we put some guidelines and things around the prophetic as well. But I think there's a time we come where we've just got to lay it down. I think we've just got to lay it down and say, God, particularly when it's stopping you from moving forward in the things of God. And look, you know, we went through a difficult situation with one of my clients last year where we had to put them into liquidation in the end. Even though we had some prophetic words and prophetic promises, but, you know, there were some core issues that were wrong, like the structure of the business was wrong. And no matter what we put in place, it wasn't there. There were some outside factors that just wasn't happening. You know, we couldn't get staff, the cost of raw materials is going through the roof. We're stuck in old contracts. The decision to close it down was very painful, and it has had some ongoing consequences, but it had to happen. Mm-hmm. And there comes a time of laying down and saying, you know what? I thought that was God, but it hasn't happened. Let's draw a line in the sand and say, let's move forward. Mm. And that's very hard and very difficult. But on the other side of that coin is I'm starting to see some resurrection stuff. Yeah. Like we talk, I talked before about we've been on the board of the Christian Business Network. You know, we started that in 2000, or prior, it was finally incorporated in 2008, been going many years before that. But we'd had a board coup, and which actually in the end resulted in the organization shutting down. And sadly, 2 of the 3 board members passed away. Mm. Like this is serious stuff. Yeah, it is. And so the last person left offered the original board the company back. And so we had to go through a year's process of sorting out all the legal stuff, paying ASIC fees, getting ACNC registered, all this kind of stuff to get it up and going again. I had another situation actually on Tuesday where many years ago I thought about a particular business and operating it here in Australia. And someone came back to me and like I'd let it die because it just wasn't the time. Someone approached me on Tuesday and said, Wes, they still haven't got the Australian license for this. I think you're the one to take it up. And I was stunned. I thought, God, that was dead and buried. There is, God is into death and resurrection.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we've got to come to that place of actually laying stuff down and saying, look, it's just not happening. And it's knowing the difference between that, because sometimes there is a pressing through that you've got to do.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult. Like we purchased another property just recently, and it was just like, to me, it seemed that things went wrong from the day we signed the contract to the day it settled. And even to the extent, David, that when it was being settled, the settlement was delayed, and the bank and the bank's lawyers were lying to our mortgage broker and was lying to our solicitors about the settlement. And so I can't stand it when someone lies to me. Like that just crosses a line for me. And our mortgage broker was telling me stuff, and I said to them, "You are lying to me. You are lying." I actually got so angry I hung up on them, because I said, I can't listen to these lies that you're telling me. And look, the day of settlement, I was at my wit's end, and I went down to the beach just for a walk, and my solicitor phoned me and said, "Wes, I need to tell you, your mortgage broker was lied to," because I couldn't work out, like, it was just lie after lie. And then he gives me this big thing saying, we're a company full of integrity, blah, 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 blah. And then he tells me this other lie.
Yeah. So you're saying, Wes, as a prophet in business and the marketplace, this is some of the things that you have to go through, really, because for a lot of people who are kingdom people in business and marketplace, they think that when God speaks, everything's just going to come together. But it doesn't really pan out like that in real life, because you still have to face people that would lie to you. You still have to face system and structure that are not properly aligned to the law of the land. So there's a lot of things that you still need to do. But I suppose in what you're saying, that if something seems like it's adverse or negative, it doesn't mean that God is not working. It doesn't mean that what God said is not true, right? Is that what you're saying there, based on your experience? I know that you have many experiences.
Oh, yes. Look, so I think part of this is that we need to learn how to discern the voice of God and discern the situations. Now, one of the issues we've got in the Pentecostal church is we've forgotten about church tradition. We've forgotten about our Catholic brothers and sisters. We've forgotten about the mystics of old, and how they, we're not taught discernment. We're not taught how to go through that process. And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm doing a lot of study in spiritual formation at the moment. And it's actually coming into the Pentecostal church at a faster pace now than I think what people are realizing, is actually learning, what does the voice of God sound like, and how do you discern situations? I've just finished a subject on the art of discernment, because it's just, I'm hearing too many people saying things. I think, have you actually read your Bible? like this is, and in fact, I was listening to someone last week. I sent him some stuff, and he said, "Wes, I'm just in the miraculous. I'm not into the Bible."
Wow.
The primary way that God speaks to us is through his word. And that's where this is one of the things, every Wednesday I run a listening prayer thing, but it's solely focused around sitting with a passage of scripture for 20 minutes in silence and just reading it through because I'm all for reading the Bible through in a year, all that kind of stuff. Hear me when I say that. But part of the problem is we read through the chapter once and think we're done and dusted and moving forward. But actually, we need to sit with a passage of scripture. And I encourage people to read through it at least 7 times, because the first and second and third time, you're still thinking about your breakfast or what you got to do today. But by the 4th, 5th, and 6th, the Spirit of God is starting to move. like I can remember at a conference I spoke at once, we read it aloud together 7 times. By the time we read it the 7 times, the thickness of
Yeah.
the Spirit of God in that room was so strong.
Yeah.
And the revelation that people got was just beyond belief. But the other thing that started to happen was people started to manifest. And because that was a very interesting experience, because the religious spirit was being chucked off.
Mm.
And it's very, very interesting.
I wanted to bounce off on what you just said there about sitting with the word and making sure you hear the voice of God. So I just want to use that as a segue into the question I sent you about outworking of prophetic speaking in the marketplace. So here's a person, for example, yourself, you're hearing God say, all right, I want you to start a business. Where do you go from there, Wes? What's the normal practical things that a entrepreneur or a kingdom business person needs to start looking into? Again, this might be based on some of your experiences, some of the common things that you have done that you can share with us. So we hear the word, God said, do this. What do we do after that?
Let me give you a very practical example of something that happened just before the pandemic, or as we were going into the pandemic.
For sure.
God said I was listening to a podcast, and God asked, the question that was being asked on the podcast was, who are you pastoring at the moment?
Mm.
And I thought, okay, God, who am I pastoring at the moment? Who are you calling me to pastor at the moment? And just as I sat with that, God said to me, I want you to pastor your estate. My estate?
Yeah.
What the heck are you talking about?
Mm.
And so I then went back to God and said, well, how do I pastor your estate? Now, often when I ask God questions, he may speak to me about it directly, but often it comes through talking to somebody else or listening to something else, or I'm reading something, and the answer comes. In that case, I was going somewhere, I had the ABC radio on, and they were talking about, because it was, remember going back February, March 2020, it was so uncertain. And so people were starting to set up Facebook groups for their streets and things like that, just all their neighbors, so that if something went wrong, they could quickly message them and say, hey, because we didn't know what we're facing. Anyhow, so God just dropped in my heart, I want you to set up a Facebook group for your estate. Okay, God, what is that?
Which is a very practical step you have to take. So you're hearing the word, now you got to do this, set up a Facebook page.
Yeah. So we set up the Facebook page, we named it, the estate that we lived in at the time is a very defined area, and we'd lived there for 20 years by that stage.
Yeah.
Very defined area. We wrote a letter. I got all the kids out. We went letterboxing. We got 90% of our estate in this Facebook group.
Oh, wow.
So, but then something very interesting started to happen, because like pastoring can mean a lot of things. But in this case, it was people started to get jobs, people started to get houses.
Oh, wow.
Neighbors started to talk to each other. We ran, it was coming up to that first Easter, and I felt God say, you've got to give away some Easter eggs. So I went out and spent $70 on Easter eggs. My wife nearly killed me. And she said, well, why don't we do a coloring in competition? So we got 40 kids in the estate, did this coloring competition, and we gave away Easter eggs. When it came time for Halloween, the whole estate was talking, like in the Facebook group, was talking about, what are we doing for Halloween? And of course, I'm beside myself, because we've been very strict with our kids that we don't participate in Halloween. And here I am facilitating Halloween. And I was talking to a prophet friend of mine, and I said, I don't know what to do. And God said, drop the trick, just treat. Drop the trick, just treat. So I said to the Facebook group, okay, between 5 and 7, we'll have kids can go door knocking. And if you want to participate, they put a thing on their letterbox so the kids knew what houses to go to and what not to go to. And God said to me, okay, so you have a sausage sizzle at your place. We got in face painting, and we got in a fairy floss machine. David, we had 100 of our neighbors in our house that night. 100 of our neighbors.
Wow.
And the stories that we heard of neighbors starting to talk to each other, those kind of things. that group is still going on. There's all sorts of other stories I could tell you about that. But that was a very specific thing that God said to me in doing.
Yeah.
So it's going back to and look, you know, one of the things that I'm learning in all this, because I remember when I was back at Martin College, I was teaching events, and so to pass the subject, they had to run an event, and the only event that we could come up with was a boozer, which just did my head in. Here I am, this Christian guy running a boozer, and I thought, God, what do I do? Like, what do I do? This is totally against my values.
Exactly.
And you know what he said to me? He said, Wes, do up an award for each of your students and prophetically ask me for the award. So I did. I had about 20 students, I think it was. So I sat down and said, okay, God, what do you prophetically want to say about each one of them?
Oh, wow.
So I did up these certificates. I got one of the other teachers to check them for me because I just, I wanted to just double check. So I got one of the senior teachers to check them. On the night, it fell apart. The program, they were expecting a band to come. The band didn't show. It was just a mess. But because I had done these certificates up, the award ceremony became the main function.
Oh, come on.
Of the night.
Yeah.
And because they were drunk, it went straight into the
house. My gosh. Wes, I mean, that's what I'm talking about, Wes, because you're talking about interpreting the prophetic word or how to navigate with God, even in a secular environment. When you talk about these kids getting drunk, and you're probably thinking, God, is you in this, or is this I'm hearing things on my own? But look at the outcome. God is actually working through that process to get to the heart of the kids, because a normal Christian will look at that and label it as God is not in it. But according to you, in the marketplace, in the real world, God speaks a word, you stepped out, and some of the process that God gives you to implement the word just look like it's, like you said, it's contradicting everything that you've learned in the church. Was there another example of that you can share with us?
When my daughter was in grade 12,
yeah,
she came to us and said, can we host the after party for the school formal?
Oh, wow.
And
yeah,
what do you do? But actually, Pam and I had a chat about it. And he thought, do you know what? We don't drink. And I'm not making that value judgment on anyone. That's just the way we were raised and stuff like that. So we thought, you know what? We can provide a safe environment for these kids. These kids are not all Christian. So I can't impose my values on them, but I can provide a safe place to them.
Exactly.
So what was funny is I rang the school and said, okay, we're gonna host the after party. The school said to me, we don't want to know.
Oh, wow.
But you know what was fantastic was the lady that I rang, the lady that answered the phone had hosted the after party last year. And she gave me all these instructions about this is how you do it. And she told, go to the police, register it, they give you armbands, all this stuff. So we charged the kids $10 each for it. And we did hire a security guard. We let our neighbors know. We had 80 kids in our house that night. And they drunk, but I think only one or two got to excess.
Yeah.
So that was okay. We could handle that. My daughter's school had a lot of special ed kids. Like there's about 30 special ed kids. David, they all rocked up in their onesies with all these animal characters, with their ginger beers. And it was all it was hilarious. So we had a great chat with them that night. So, it started at 11, went to 4 a.m. But, the next day at the graduation, I had parents coming up and giving me a hug. And saying, thank you so much. You accepted my kid. And you gave him an experience in a safe place.
Oh, wow.
And I'll never forget those conversations.
Oh, wow.
So, I think this is one of the things.
I can feel the heart of the Father in that story. Honestly, Wes, I can feel the heart of the Father in that story. Loving us just the way we are. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be holy and pure. God loves us all, whether you go to church or not. That demonstration to me, that story I could just feel the heart of the Father towards his kids.
David, there's a story that was shared at the Lausanne conference many years ago, and a good friend of mine shared it with me, that talks about the difference between frogs and lizards.
Yeah.
So I think one of the issues we've got in the marketplace is that we're looking at how the church runs things, and we're trying to take the way the church runs it and puts it in the marketplace.
Exactly.
And that doesn't work. So I can't get up and speak to my class the 4 spiritual laws and get my class to come to know Christ. Like, if I did that, I would be sacked, because it's not. But so this is the difference between frogs and lizards. Your frog, well-known speaker, there's a platform, big frogs come to town, they get put up in hotels, security around them, all this kind of stuff. Like, there are some churches now in the US, because of security, they actually never get to talk to their congregation. It's very sad. And ministry opportunities come the frog's way all the time. But the difference in the marketplace is we're lizards, we're hunters. We have to go out there and do that. Let me tell you, the demand to get a payroll every week is huge. That's a massive pressure on marketplace people. To do that, you talk about it, it's like the church can just stand up and say, we're short on money, please give more money. That's their answer. We can't stand up and say, I'm short on money, please give me money.
Exactly.
It doesn't work that way.
No.
It's about, okay, God, which customers do I have to go? Like, where's the customer? Who are the people I need to talk to? Where's the opportunity? How do I cut my costs down so that I can be much more profitable, in doing this? It's very different. It's very, very different. But that doesn't mean to say that marketplace miracles don't happen. Like, I get, money comes from all sorts of very strange places, I've learned.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, the answer isn't always money. And so sometimes, like, if we've got bills to pay and things like that, is, okay, God, we're asking for the money, but it's not. It's the strategy to get that money.
That's it.
That we need to go for and ask that. It's a different thing. Like, I grew up reading all the different missionaries' stories and things like that, but you can't take them and apply them to a marketplace situation.
No.
So it's like, okay, God, you've given me this business idea. What does it look like? You're like, we're putting together a course at the moment. Okay, God, who are the people? Where do I need to go to? Who do I need to talk to? What does this look like? What's the strategy here?
Which brings me to the other question that I sent you, Wes, about the challenges that you face in the marketplace in outworking the speaking of God, the prophetic word of God. I know you've already touched on a few things with that man lying to you. Are there other challenges that you face in the marketplace? Because it's a wild west out there. It's not it's a jungle, right, Wes? And God put us there. Yeah.
The interesting thing about that property thing is, I'd read this. The guy, a big well-known prophetic name. I was reading one of his prophetic books, and he was talking about whenever he has bought property, the vendors have always been angry to him. There's something about transferring property.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things is, and it came to being when we bought the home we've lived in for a while. God said to me, I'm getting you to buy this because you're redeeming the land.
Oh, wow.
And there's one of the things that we don't realize is this: when sin, like when we commit sin or someone commits sin, it actually affects the land. It defiles the land. And so whether it's be by bloodshed or broken covenant or idolatry, it affects the land. And there's that need for that land to be cleansed. And so sometimes when we're dealing with this stuff, it's we don't really realize that actually there's a battle over the land that's taking place.
Wow.
We're almost ready.
Yeah.
David, I think one of the key things I've learned is actually, before you go to a meeting, is say, God, what's your heart for this meeting? Like I know, God taught me this in a big way. I arrived about 15 minutes early for a meeting one day.
And you're talking about a board meeting or a business meeting here, right? Where's a meeting with politicians?
Any meeting, a meeting with the customer, a meeting with the
Yeah.
employee, meeting
All
with
right.
like, because I mean, David, you and I know that our lives are full of meetings. Like it's just not another meeting. Oh God,
Exactly.
no. But when meetings happen, God can move. So this particular day, I was early, said, God, what do I do? He said, have a 2 chairs time with me. Ask me what's on my heart for this meeting. And he just dropped into my mind, talk about homeschooling. And I thought, God, so that had nothing to do with the meeting I was in. And it wasn't my meeting, it was somebody else's meeting, but I was being tagged along, to be a part of it. And at the end, the guy turns to me and says, Wes, is there anything you want to raise? I said, I want to raise homeschooling. And the end result of that was $1 million contract was signed.
Oh, wow.
Between 2 organizations that I put together.
Wow.
And I thought, God, that was left field. But like
Wow.
to this day, that stuff still goes on.
Wow.
So, the thing is that we are constantly thinking one way, but often God wants to do this suddenly. And
Wow.
it's often one word. Like it's one word. Like in that case, it was homeschooling. Just talk about homeschooling. He didn't give me anything else, but yeah, you never know. And
Well,
like I've heard of people saying, going to a meeting and God said to them, don't talk.
wow.
Just shut up in this meeting. And the whole situation is turned around because they were quiet.
Yeah, but they still walk out with being the winner of that day because they obeyed the Lord. And I like what you're saying, because the assumption is if God speaks to me about certain things, then that means I have to convey my thoughts in the meeting. But God may just say to you, be quiet, because his strategy is always different for different opportunities and different settings. And it takes me back to what you said before. It's not what God said, but what he's saying. Yeah. It's the ongoing conversation we've got in every aspect of the journey in the marketplace. I'm hearing that in your stories tonight, and that's why I wanted to pull out of you, because people need to hear that.
So when you're having that conversation, like it's very important that you be listening to the person you're saying. You're having that conversation with them, paying attention to them. But you've also got to be going up this way too. Okay, this person is saying this, but what do you say? Because often there's something behind something that's going on. Yeah. And what's the real reason behind this?
Do you find at times that God speaks to you and confirm what he has spoken to through somebody else that you're speaking with in those conversations? Does that happen a lot to you?
Or it gives clarity. Like I was going to a meeting one day and I felt God say the issue is covetousness. And I'm thinking, oh God, does that mean I need to talk to this person about their issue of covetousness? Okay. But actually what it wasn't their issue of covetousness, because something they said pretty early on in the conversation was that other people were jealous of them. Oh, wow. And it was actually, we need to deal with this situation. So like, sometimes we had a situation where going into a meeting, God had given one of my intercessors the word bordello, and I had no idea what bordello meant. It turns out it was so I actually asked the owner of the business, does bordello mean anything to you? And his face went red. Oh my goodness. For those who don't know, it means a whorehouse prostitution thing. So his face was red. But but the issue was, it wasn't that he was involved in anything. The issue was that the previous tenants in one of the shops they had was an adult shop. And so there was lingering stuff that we need to deal with. And, we actually cleansed that office. Oh, wow. And the next day, a staff member phoned up, confessed to being gay, which was totally against this Christian. Yeah. Like it was against the values of the company. But he also confessed to stealing money from the company and resigned. So there was it was all uncovered. And I thought, man, we prayed that Sunday afternoon, and here's this phone call, 8 a.m. on Monday morning, and the guy's resigning and confessing to what he'd done with the company. And so God removed what the blockage was within that particular department. Wow. And moved forward.
Wes, here's a question. Do you find that the more time you're out there in the marketplace, meeting with just ordinary people, doing all these meetings, conversation, deals, proposing projects, and so forth. In the midst of people who don't know God, they don't go to church, but they're cussing and cursing and being themselves, right? Do you feel the heart of God for people that is actually quite strong, and his desire to reach their hearts in moments like that? Because I have experienced those moments, even being at our coffee shop in Carina and Wellington Point. And besides all the crazy things that they're saying, and even talking about other business people to me, or talk about their friends and family to me, but you can always feel like this is a place where Jesus would love to sit and just have that conversation with them. Did you feel that a heartbeat of God for people more and more out there in the marketplace? I just wanted to ask whether you experienced that or not.
So every person is made in the image of God. Every person is made in the image of God. And every person is loved by God.
Mm.
So I come from that perspective. Look, and I've sat with some people who've got some terrible language, and just through various circumstances, I had a great chat with a prostitute recently. It's not good. Like, God, what the heck? How do you talk to someone like that? But we had a lovely chat, and I said to her at the end, I'll give you a far out example. I do a little bit of Ubering on the side because I love it. I make lots of contacts, and this one day I'm working away, and like I was just at my desk, and God said, "You need to go Ubering now. Like, you need to go now." And it was just so strong. Like, I remember I got very flustered, and I got up and started to drive, and it was about 20 minutes before like I got a ride. And then when this pinged up, this girl got in the car, and she was crying her eyes out. And excuse my language here. She said, "I've just left my fuck buddy."
Yeah, that's what I mean. In the real world, there is no filters to the language, right? But that's where God placed us, marketplace people. That's what we have to deal with.
So
yeah.
You know, David, when we did evangelism training, it was taking people through the 4 spiritual laws, blah, 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 blah. I don't find that works for me. Okay, I'm not an evangelist, and I say that very clearly. You know, I've got friends who are leading people to the Lord left, right, and center.
Yeah. That's
not me. But so in this situation, like, she tells the story, she's a stripper, she has this guy, she's very upset. Like, and you know, to me, I had in my mind what a stripper looked like, and she didn't look like what a stripper looked like to me.
Exactly.
And yeah, we're in the car for 40 minutes. That's a long time.
Wow.
So, you know, all this Billy Graham stuff that you're not, anyhow, you know, like all things that fly out the window in this situation. Yeah. So I thought, God, what do I do? And I just heard him say, just keep asking your questions. Because if you look at what Jesus did, he just constantly asked questions. Like, he was just like, what do you want? Anyhow, we got to the end of the ride. Yeah. And I said to her, "I'm sorry, I have not helped you one iota." She turned to me and said, "Sir, you've helped me more than what you'll ever know." And gave me a big hug and got out of the car.
There you go. See that, Wes, how much they're looking for love and acceptance?
Yes.
But we're so judgmental as Christians, and that's probably one of the things that we need to highlight here, that if you are a marketplace kingdom entrepreneur or businessman, that people just want to be loved and accepted, that we don't have to go there with the holy then thou kind of attitude, because that's why he's placed us there, to be the light and salt to a world that is just looking for love and acceptance. And some of these people are millionaires and billionaires, but they're still miserable. They're unhappy.
That's it. You know, and I think we have to get off our high horses and off our hobby horses. And because we're in a situation, when you're in the marketplace, we now have a much larger gay and lesbian population than what we've ever had before.
Exactly.
look, we don't know what's going on in there. And I know some people, gone lawsuits and said, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, blah, 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 blah. What if you're the only Christian that's in their life? What if God has brought those people into your sphere of influence for a reason? To build relationship with them? Now, the stats show that those relationships are going to fall apart. Like the majority. I had a situation after the marriage stuff went through. I was just saying to God, I don't understand. This is totally against what you want, but yet you've passed the legislation.
Yeah.
And soon after that, I was talking to a gay guy who had got married overseas, but his relationship had broken down. And he said to me, I needed those laws to pass because I had to get divorced. I can't get divorced in the country I got married in because I'm not a citizen of that country, and I can't get divorced in Australia because my marriage isn't recognized. He said, I am stuck. And I thought, oh God, the grace of God. Now, I'm not making of course I don't want those laws to be passed.
Yeah.
But, what Satan meant for evil, God means for good. He can turn anything around.
So true.
And I think we've got to lay down the 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people would humble themselves and pray and seek my face, turn from their wicked ways. What God has been saying to me is, you need to lay down all rights, all expectations. And how many times, David, do we walk into a prayer meeting and we're demanding of God the answer to this particular situation?
So true.
Well, the answer to this is $100,000 in my bank account now. The answer to this is this legislation not being passed. The answer to this is this person being removed from power, or being removed from church leadership, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He's been saying to me, first of all, you sit and ask me what's on my heart. Ask me first. Ask me first. Ask me first. And then there's that belief and trust that you've got to follow that through.
Yeah.
And look, that's I've had to stop listening in prayer meetings because it can be quite painful actually to hear the way people pray at times.
Yeah. Because
they're projecting on God what they want and not what God wants. And is that part of the situation? Like even like these prophetic words that have been around for a long time. But have you had a conversation with him about those?
Exactly.
Like, sometimes, yes, it's for an appointed season. Yeah. And I get that and understand that. But there are other times that we've been holding on to things.
Yeah.
And we've just got to let it go. And the thing with that is that God is doing a new, like he constantly says he's doing a new thing. But for that new to come, we have to let go of the old. Okay. And that's like at different times when God said to me, you need to resign from this job. And you're thinking, heck, that's like...
Yeah, that's the financial implication.
But I can say that every time that's happened, the next round has been higher. Like we've gone through a situation at the moment where my teaching hours have been cut back. And I've just been saying, okay, God, this is not anything of my doing. It's just that, the education right across the board at the moment, enrollments are way down because we've got full employment and overseas students are not coming in. Yeah. And I've just been saying, God, obviously you want to do something different with me. Yeah. And I feel like there's this shaking that's going on at the moment. Wow. That God is just clearing some stuff out. Yeah. And one of the best ways that God is going to talk to you is through money. So when the money dries up and stops flowing, there's a reason for that. Yeah. And sometimes you just got to get on your face and repent and just say, God, is there anything? And I've been in organizations where we've done that. The money is stopped and we thought, okay, God, hang on a minute. Is there something we've missed? And sometimes you've got to get this relationship right. You've got to stop this, blah, 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 blah. It could be you got to sack staff. You've got to make some things. Yeah. And then once you've done that, the money can just start flowing again. Wow. But there's other times whether it's stopped and it's because God wants to bring a change. And it's not a sin to go out of business. It's not a sin to go. It's not a sin to shut down a ministry.
Wow.
There is reasons.
I like what you said there, because a lot of people think that they have missed God when they have to shut down a business, or the ministry is not the way it used to be, and they have interpreted it in a very negative way, and that could be more painful than it was in the beginning. So it's good that you point that out. Wes, we have 5 minutes, but I actually want to ask you the last question. 2 Chronicles 7:14. I know you alluded to that earlier. Can you give us the essence of what God is saying to you about 2 Chronicles 7:14, which is something that I believe that it's been really heavy on your heart?
Look, it has been, and it's humbling ourselves, laying everything down totally, and giving up rights to outcomes or expectations. Lord, I think this is what you wanted to do. Well, why do you think that, Wes?
Yeah.
Is that really what's on my heart to happen? What is that? And, so often when God's spoken to me about something, I've interpreted one way, but in that ongoing conversation, it's laying it down. David, we're in a mess at the moment. I actually think the economy is in a lot worse shape than what we think at the moment. Like, I know our government's rolling in cash, but actually, like we've got interest rates going through the roof. But it's not just that. It's shopping's gone up, the groceries gone up, electricity's going up, everything's going up.
Everything's going up.
And wages are not meeting it. And I just think there's a huge shaking that's going on at the moment. Even my conversation with the prostitute the other day was, I actually asked her how business was going, because one of the signs of economy going bad is that they're the first ones to get hit. And so she said to me, normally I do 5 clients a night, I'm only doing 2. Okay. And so while we can rejoice at that on one level, the other level, it actually raised real alarm bells for me, because it actually shows that there's not the cash in the economy that we're thinking. But this is where like people like George William Carver, he was an economist, agroeconomist back in the 1800s, who told everyone to grow peanuts, and they did very well. But the problem is they had all these peanuts and they didn't know what to do with them. So he laid down and said, God, show me what's in this peanut. Wow. And God gave him over 300 inventions for the peanut. Now, one of those is peanut paste. So you can thank George William Carver you can thank God for peanut paste.
Yeah.
But so what I'm saying is, God, this is a time of just being on our faces before him, saying, God, what's your solution?
Yeah.
What's your solution to this? Yeah. Some businesses are going to have to go through and sack staff. We're seeing business after business close down at the moment. But at the same time, we're seeing new ideas and new inventions coming forward. Wow. What is that new thing that God wants to do? Wow. And I think that's part of the 2 Chronicles 17 is actually laying down the old. Wow. Yeah, this is, I thank God for COVID. And I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, because one of the things that happened is the spirit of control was broken off churches and broken off people, because now I'm going to get in huge trouble for saying this.
No, keep going, keep saying it. We need to hear the truth and nothing but the truth, Wes.
So one of the issues that I see in particularly Pentecostal churches is that the man of God or the woman of God receives the vision and everybody else needs to come forward and serve that vision. Baloney. This is the role of the church is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So this is a season. And so like he had, I know the Royal Commission brought in, we had to sign all these agreements and contracts and blah, 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 blah. And so many of my friends have refused to sign those things. So they've actually had to step out of leadership positions in church. But you know what that's meant is that they've done the ministry themselves. They no longer have to go to the church to get permission to minister. They just do it. Because if they went to the church to minister, they're going to have to sign this agreement. They're going to have to follow this, blah, 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 blah. But God is calling us to make a difference in the marketplace that's not confined by structure, but there's a flow to it. And churches have got to get over this. Like I had one of my friends was reaching 25,000 people a year. His business was impacting 25,000 people a year.
Wow.
One of his staff got sacked, and his church eldership hauled him over the coals for what happened. And I said, "You've got to be kidding me." Like that staff member had to go. There was reasons why he was sacked. And it's not an issue for the church board to get involved in doing that. But please, can you support this man that's literally reaching 25,000 people a year? Now, that church at the time was 4,000 people. It was a large church. You know, but this guy was having much greater impact than what that church was having.
Wow.
Sometimes we've got to recognize that. But the other thing is, marketplace people are so humble, you wouldn't know that that's actually what's going on. You know, with them, because they just get on and do it. They're not big showers. They don't like to talk about what they're doing. They just do it. And I think that's where we're at, is God is speaking. Let's just do it. You know, are you going to fail? Absolutely. There's times I've fallen on my face so much. It's just like you're buried in mud, you know, and it's just, you got to wash yourself up, have a number of showers, put some relationships right, which is key, you know. Get those relationships right, because it's all about those. And sometimes that's going to take a year or 2 or 3 to get that done, maybe later. But pick up and move forward. And you know what? Actually, people are going to honor you for that as well, because no one's perfect. We're not always going to get it right. But hey, you know, like sometimes I just think I open my mouth to change feet. It's just, you know, I made some monumental stuff ups over time, huge monumental stuff ups, but I've also seen how God has used those and taught me huge lessons, so that when you're in that next situation, you recognize those things and think, hang on, I can see this happening. I need to quickly go talk to this person, or do this, or do that,
because you learn that from failing. And that's something beautiful about the marketplace that I've learned, is how quickly they turn their failures into positive outcomes, because they know that failing is the key to success. A podcast I was listening to the other day talk about, if you want to make the millions and the billions, fail fast. Because the sooner you fail, the quicker you learn the keys to success. They talk about failing and failures as something positive, but not so much in the church. And I think that's something that we are learning, being in a marketplace, that failing is part of the process of getting up to the height of that mountain that you're climbing, right?
Well, because it's a learning experience. Like, you know, David, when was the last time you heard a minister got up and say that, hey, we got this decision wrong?
Exactly.
Or apologize to the people? But like, the other thing is, not just because I've heard some apologies, but it's
I know.
It's not, they're not really apologies. And there is an art to doing an apology that actually brings about change. You know, and you know that you can apologize to your wife and say sorry, because you know you just got to get it over and done with. But there's actually a real thing of actually sitting down and saying, you know what?
It's a formality. It's a formality. You got to do it, you know, and get on with it. But
but there's actually, okay, we've done this wrong. This is what we're going to do as a result of that. And you know, and that's the thing about being in the marketplace, is, you know, you've learned, okay, that didn't work. We apologize. The problem is it does affect other people's lives. And sometimes, you know, and sometimes others do suffer the consequences of a lot of times they suffer the consequences of your decisions. Like, your family suffers the consequences first, because money stops flowing and they can't do what they want to do. And your partner bears the brunt of that a lot of times, and your kids bear the brunt of it. But then they also see,
they're very forgiving if you're genuine. People are very forgiving if you're genuine and honest. Because they know that we all make mistakes. And
and there's that old saying, you follow a leader with a limp. You know, and you know, and some of the stuff ups I've had, it's actually caused deeper friendships when you've actually worked it through with people. And like, you look back now, what am I, 53 now? You look back at some of the stuff I did in my 20s and 30s, And some of those relationships from back then, where some people were hurt and things, are now some of my closest friends now. And I look at that and think, oh God, that is the grace of God.
Yeah.
In doing
So
that.
good. Wes, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you on this live chat tonight. And so good to be able to talk with you and asking the questions that I have asked. I know that there's so much more in you and your experience that we still need to hear from, but because of our time,
Yes. No.
Thank you so much. Bless you and bless your family and also the marketplace ministry that you're in right now. And drop by at Sulam. Let me know and we can do coffee again. And by the way, before I let you go, I want to thank you for giving me one of the books about the two chairs, because I was one of the recipients of those books, and they are such a blessing. And you know, it's fun. There are two chairs. There you go. And you know, a friend of mine came to the shop, and this a businessman, and I had the book with me, and we end up talking about life and all these things. And something that I find in the marketplace is people, when they sense that you're honest and genuine, and they don't have to know that you are a pastor, they open up quite immediately to you and start telling you about the issues that they're going through. And at the end of the conversation, he saw one of my books on the bookshelf, and he said, "Oh, are those your books?" And I said, "Yeah. Can I take one?" I said, "No, take this one." So I gave him, because he gave me a copy of the two chairs, and I gave him, I think you gave me two, and I gave him one, and somebody else took one. I was halfway reading that one, and another person did. But this is all happening in the marketplace, Wes. So what am I trying to say is, next time you come, can you bring me a copy?
Yeah.
Two chairs.
My problem is I've given them all away.
Okay, don't worry. I'll get one online. I'll get one online. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Share this conversation. This was a very practical conversation, actually. And it's good to know how we can outwork and implement the speaking of God in the marketplace, and how we need to change from the church way of doing things and do it God's way in the marketplace, because they're very different spheres of influence. Bless you, share this, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.